Hello everyone, and welcome to the video you didn't know you were waiting for. Yoshi won Kenobi's top 10 cards for standard from Kaldheim. Now let's rock on this set full of god cards and sagas, more that you can handle, and let's see what cards made it to the top. At the 10th position on our list, we have Port of Carfell. Now this is a tap land, and the cycle of tap land at uncommon is actually fairly decent. Port of Carfell is my favorite one out of the gang because you get to sacrifice the land to revive a creature, and you get to do it at instant speed for the cheap cost of 7 mana. Okay, it's super expensive, but as opposed to the other lands that we've gotten from Zendikar Rising, you don't need to you don't have to pick between the land mode or the effect mode. You always play it as a land mode, and then eventually later in the game you get to cash it in for some very powerful effect, or you just keep on using it for mana. It's a win-win situation, other than it enters the battlefield tap. See details inside the box. On the 9th position in our list, we have Calamitybearer. Now this is Obosh for 4. It's a 3/4 creature that doubles the damage dealt by all giant sources you control, whether it's dealt to permanent or to a player. And you know one very nice giant that's still in standard to wreak havoc? Bone Crusher Giant. So you get to curve perfectly a Bone Crusher Giant into a Calamitybearer into a Quakebringer. Also know that the doubling of the damage by Calamitybearer is going to work on Quakebringer, whether it's on the battlefield or the graveyard, for double the burn, because after all, who doesn't love playing burn decks or against them? At the position number 8 in our countdown, we have Fioras Retribution, another one of the powerful sagas. The rare sagas in the set are very powerful, and I've picked the handful few that I think are the most powerful, and Fioras Retribution is one of those. The first mode is you create a 4/4 Angel, Flying Vigilance. Already a 4/4 flyer for force, decent value. If I did, the tokens a slight downside, but still. The second mode, until end of turn, angels you control gain tap, destroy target creature with power less than this creature's power. This is pretty much a one-sided board wipe if you control a bunch of angels, especially against, say, like a Gruul or medium to small creatures deck. Pretty much anything that's not a Lovestruck Beast, your angels are going to just kill by tapping. Also, they have vigilance most of the time, so they'll get to swing in the air, then wipe out your opponent's board before the third chapter, which is also very powerful. It gives your big flying creatures double strike, and we've learned from Embercleave, double strike hurts. It ends games. So you get good value, a one-sided board wipe, followed by winning the game. What's not to like? And that's why I like Fioras Retribution so much. Of course, that's perfect world scenario. If your opponent destroys your angel, then you cry a little bit. But we always like dream world scenarios. At least I do. I do. At the 7th position on our list, we have another land, Tyrite Sanctum. Now this one enters untapped, produces colorless mana. So far, it's alright. I mean, entering untapped is fairly good for a land. It's one of the main things we like about it. But the things we like about this land is that you get to pay 2, and you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a legendary creature. It also becomes a god, because why not? It's flavor text mostly. But you get to put a +1/+1 counter on a legendary creature at instant speed, which will allow us to save our legendary creatures from a Heartless Act and decrease its value index significantly. And the real power of this card is the fact that you can pay 4 mana and sack the Sanctum to put an indestructible counter on target god. Indestructible is one of those rare keywords that's extremely powerful because the opponent can only kill your creatures with insert list of a dozen ways to actually kill creatures, including exile, sacrifice, exile all, steal the creature. You know, there's a bunch of ways to deal with creatures, but still, indestructible is a powerful keyword, one of the most powerful keywords there is, that and hexproof. So giving a god card indestructible is pretty good. Also, if you have 2 Tyrite Sanctums and 6 mana, you get to transform a legendary creature into a god, put a +1/+1 counter, sack the Tyrite Sanctum, and then make that creature indestructible, which means we get to put an indestructible counter on any legendary creature if we have the 2 Tyrite Sanctums and the mana. And that's a very powerful effect. There's creatures like hexproof creatures that you make indestructible, and suddenly they're almost undealable with threat, save for extinction event, for example. Also, we get to have some fun with Ozolith to move the indestructible counter around, but that's not really the power of this card. It's really just the fact that it's versatile for the +1/+1 counters, enters untapped, and indestructibility for gods and shapeshifters is actually quite relevant. At number 6 on our list, we have Cardors' Vicious Return. This is my favorite saga in the set. I'm not exactly sure why. I can't put my finger as to why I think that this is so powerful, but just the series of powerful effects that synergize well with each other. You may sacrifice a creature, and when you do, it deals 3 damage to any target. So a lightning bolt effect where you're forced to sacrifice a creature. Alright, it's a little bit situational, but you'll typically play this card in a deck that wants to sacrifice creatures. And sometimes it's even positive to sacrifice a creature. So positive in Lightning Bolt, it's a good way to start. Second ability, each player discards a card. The symmetrical effect. It's okay. It's okay. But then let's look at Chapter 3. Return target creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a +1/+1 counter on it. It gains haste until your next turn. Now that's typically an effect we get for 5 mana. We're getting this for 4, with 2 other abilities, which makes it quite powerful. Although we do have some delay before we reach Chapter 3. But what I really like about this card is the fact that Chapter 2 sets you up for Chapter 3. A lot of times when you're playing these reanimator strategies, you need to find a way to put your big payoff creature in a graveyard, you need to find the mana, and then you need to find a way to reanimate it. Well, this only costs 4. It puts the creature from your hand to the graveyard, and it reanimates it, and it gives it haste, and there's a Chapter 1 with more value. So there's a lot of value in this card, and when this card finds the right deck, which is also probably going to be playing Kroxa, then it's going to be Cardors' Vicious Return. The next card on our list at position number 5 is actually a common card from Kaldheim, and it's Snakeskins Veil. Now this is just a very quick combat trick. So 1 green, instant, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. It gains hexproof until end of turn. Typically, this type of card gives you +1/+1 and a hexproof, and that's fairly played. It's actually the type of card that even gets played in like Historic, because it's so cheap and it protects a creature from a kill spell. In this case, we even get a +1/+1 counter, which means that it's going to increase the size of the creature permanently, which is even more valuable than some of the other effects, which are typically just used to save a creature from a kill spell. Well, now you get permanent value out of it. What's not to like? Since we are talking about value commons, there's another one at the 4th position in our top 10 list, which is Masked Vandal. Now this is a 1/3 for 2, so poor stats actually. It's a changeling, which is quite positive. That means that it's potentially a god, it's potentially an elf, it's potentially a party member, which is very positive. But the real value is in its enter the battlefield effect. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard, and if you do, exile an artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. Now, the exile a creature from the graveyard is an extra cost. But cards like this, like Reclamation Sage, which costs 1 more mana and destroys an enchantment or artifact, has seen play as a sideboard card and even sometimes as a mainboard card in previous instances of Standard and even older formats. So Masked Vandal costs 1 full less mana. has slightly weaker stats, although it can be used as a blocker. 3 toughness, not that bad. But exiling an enchantment or artifact is extremely powerful, especially in standard in this world of saga and epic legendary artifacts like a Great Henge or Embercleave. You just go Mass Vandal, there it goes. Bye bye Great Henge. I'm going to exile Anax. That's some sweet value right there for your 2-drop. Red's going to hate seeing this. I mean, exiling Anax and exiling Embercleave and having a 1/3 blocker with Changeling to support your tribe, it's fantastic. And we're about to enter the top 3. So in the 3rd position in our top 10 list, and In Search of Greatness is In Search of Greatness. So this is a 2-mana enchantment that allows you to play stuff for free. And as we've seen with Fires of Invention, playing stuff for free is very, very, very powerful. This is somewhere between Chalice of the Void and Fires of Invention, but a bit more restrictive. So at the beginning of your upkeep, you may cast a permanent spell from your hand with converted mana cost equal to exactly 1, plus the highest converted mana cost among other permanents you control, without paying its mana cost. So if you have the perfect curve with this, you'll be able to drop permanents all over your opponent's face and just go blah blah blah, free stuff, and you're dead. The downside compared to a card like Fires of Invention is that it's harder to predict which cards you'll be able to play because, well, first of all, if you play this on turn 2, you don't get the value immediately because you need the permanent already on the battlefield. Goes very well with flash creatures or flash enchantments. Doom Foretold is going to love this. You play this on turn 2, then on turn 3 you flash an Omen of the Sun. As that trigger is on the stack, then you let it resolve. You get to play Doom Foretold for free on turn 3 and some very crazy stuff like that. But you need to have the good curve in hand, and you need to be able to keep permanents on the battlefield. I'm sure this is going to find a home into probably an enchantments or planeswalker type of deck, a deck that can stick permanents on the battlefield without opposition. And if you have a little bit of control over your draws, you can do ridiculous things with Search of Greatness, and I would not be surprised if this card broke the format. It just needs to find a good home, and I'm sure all the deck builders are out there just tinkering decks and ideas with this card, and I'm sure I'll make at least one video with it because it's awesome, it's fun, and it's powerful. Well, it's awesome and fun until it hits the ban list. And now, the silver medalist, the runner-up, is one of the god cards, Alvar, God of Battle, ready to fight with some heavy-hitting enchantments and runes and all kinds of stuff. But really, we don't care that much about Alvar. We care about the Sword of the Realms. This legendary equipment will give a run for its money to Embercleave. It gives +2/+0 in vigilance to a creature, and whenever the creature dies, it returns to its owner's hand. And this equipment does 2 things that equipments are weak for. The first one is you lose out on value, because the equipment's not a creature, it doesn't do anything on its own. Well, you attach it once to a creature, that creature dies, you've just gained back the card, and you still have the enchantment. So you can create loops with this. It's very scary with Fervent Champion, because you get to cast Fervent Champion for 1 red, you get to equip it for 1 white, and it becomes a 3/1 first strike vigilance, which is very powerful, that will return to your hand when it dies, and then you get to cast it and equip it again. So just the synergy with Fervent Champion is just wonderful, as long as you're playing it, of course. The second downside that gets overcome by Alvar is the fact that if you draw multiple copies of your legendary enchantment, or legendary equipment, well, yeah. Well, you just play the god. I mean, it's a 4/4/4/4 that gives you equipped creatures double strike. I mean, double strike's good. Double strike's really good. And then it has this weird ability where at the beginning of each combat, you may attach an aura or equipment attach a creature to another target creature. It's a bonus effect. I mean, I'm not going to complain about it. It's not very good, but I'm not going to complain about it too much. We get the Sword of the Realms, which is how you'll be playing this card most of the time. And finally, and the number one position, the best card for Standard in Kaldheim is Jorn, God of Winter. Now this card is a 3/3 God snow creature. Whenever it attacks, untap each snow permanent you control. So the God side is why it's number one. It's extremely powerful. Why? Because in Standard, you get to choose your lands, and you get to play all snow lands if that is what you choose. In which case the text becomes, whenever Jorn attacks, untap all the lands you control. And what have we learned about doubling your mana from Nissa Who Shakes the World, Wilderness Reclamation, or Omnath Locust of Creation? Well, Jorn is likely to suffer the same fate. Of course, it forces you to play all snow lands, which is a small hit to your mana base. If you're playing 2 colors, it's not so bad. If you're playing 3 colors, makes it a bit more difficult. Then you also have, because the card wasn't strong enough as is, the snow artifact, the Caldheim, the Rim Staff. And that's a permanent value artifact, which is very good on its own. So you tap it, you play a snow permanent card from your graveyard, enters the battlefield tap. Sure, that's alright. And you just get permanent value of your Rime Staff. And you ultimately win the game. But mostly because Jorn is going to untap all your lands. And that allows you to play Jorn on turn 3. Then on turn 4, Questing Beast, attack with Boat, Embercleave. That's the new Gruul, folks. And that concludes our top 10 list for Kaldheim. Tell me what you've enjoyed. Tell me where you disagree. Tell me where you agree. Tell me what type of decks you want to see. And I will see you in the next video. Well, you'll see me in the next video because I'm on the screen. I hope you've enjoyed this video. Don't forget to subscribe by clicking the Yoshi icon at the right of your screen. It doesn't cost you any mana, and it greatly helps to support this channel and keep the awesome videos coming.